promised, I'm joined by a panel that is now made up of 3 people. The Nandi Senator, Samson Cherargei, has joined the panel. Next to him, as I said, is Charles Kipkulei, a political analyst. And next to Charles is the Honorable Member of Parliament for Alego, Usonga, that is Sam Atandai. Thank you very much for joining us. We've had several responses to the question of a referendum. There's a story we ran where the DP was categorical that any attempt to impede his 2022 run for the presidency will be met with resistance. He was responding to James Orengo's statement on Friday when he said we need to move from a presidential system of government to a parliamentary one. I'll start with you, Sam. What do you understand by a parliamentary system of government?
Thank you, Olive, and also thank you for inviting me to NTV. This is my first time to come to NTV.
We're very happy to have you.
Let me begin by saying that the question of a referendum is something that I would like to plead with Kenyans to, especially the politicians, not to look at it with a narrow lens. Because in 2010, when the new constitution was promulgated, the review commission recommended that between 7 to 10 years, there would be need for an assessment of the constitution to check whether it is sitting pretty with Kenyans. And the convention that we're having now really is towards meeting that proposition, because we have had this constitution now for more than 7 years. And we can feel where it is pinching us. And so I think that people clamoring for referendum right now are really in the right space. And I personally would like to say that I support those conversations, except that the conversion for a referendum is not a political conversion only. If you are going to talk about changing the constitution, it must be a discussion that must be done by all Kenyans.
Okay, and must take a holistic approach.
It must take a holistic approach, not politicians only to engage and to belabor Kenyans with this conversation.
Okay, Senator, in your opinion, is this the right time to be having this conversation with regard to a referendum?
In my own opinion, I think there are many other pressing needs that Kenyans should be discussing about. I think we are creating a diversionary tactic so that Kenyans are now forgetting the cost of living. There are so many issues that I know it will reach a need to review this to constitution, but this is not the right time, because are now on the issue of high cost of living. We are creating a diversionary tactic, and the ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi said if you give an option somebody who is hungry, he will not have a right or sane decision to make about. So I think referendum at this point of the time is not important. It's not necessary. It is not. There are things that are urgent but not needful. And I want to say, and I think that the drafters of the constitution, we must be very grateful to them, because if you look at Article 255 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, it has tightened, because now people are now, when we talk about referendum, people are now discussing elongating the table in the executive table, because even the conversation we are having is we introduce the Prime Minister's position, we expand the executive because of parochial interest, because we are saying let us have a more expanded executive so that in future we don't have post-election or pre-election violence, and that is a very shallow and narrow agenda.
I intend to challenge you on that, but there's still a question that's not been answered, that's not been made clear, and perhaps Charles, you could provide that clarity. Explain it for the people who don't understand. What is the difference between a presidential system of government, which is what we currently have, and a parliamentary one as proposed by ODM?
Yeah, thanks, Olive. I think Kenyans clearly understand what a presidential system of government means, because this is what we have. It means when you go to elections, that is given to the citizen to select the president. So they choose a president who has executive powers, is the head of state and also head of government. And alongside that, they elect directly members of parliament, who then go and undertake their oversight and representation roles. But in the flip side, when you go to a parliamentary system of government, then we are removing that power of electing the executive from the people and taking it to parliament, where now the competition shifts from electing a president to now the party that has the majority representation in the National Assembly, which then gets to appoint a prime minister who shall be maybe the head of that party, the party leader. should be now becomes the prime minister. That then becomes a parliamentary system of government, where essentially the difference is that this idea that we've always had, where citizens have direct decision of electing the president, is removed from them, and then also the president ceases to be the executive head of government. It becomes now the prime minister, who shall be elected by parliament, not directly.
So are you making the case that when we go to the ballot, we are not casting a ballot for the president?
Yes.
We're casting, we limit it at the legislature.
Yeah.
And then the majority in the legislature now put forward a prime minister.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Okay. Would that have to be a parliamentarian?
No, in some instances, it's not a must to be a parliamentarian, but it is the decision of the largest or coalition of elected member or parties that are and they can select the person they would wish to be the president. And I think Parliament now will not be having one man, one vote. It will not be universal suffrage, because Kenyans now will no longer have the decision to elect who is the president. But it will be, it will now be reduced to 300 and maybe 49 Parliament, members of National Assembly or either house, that now will decide who becomes the president of Kenya.
Okay.
And those you can see in the UK and I think also South Africa, where they decide on how they want to elect the president based on few people who are in National Assembly or in the Senate.
Okay, Sam, I see you really want to come in at that point. Is that assessment accurate?
Well, let me go to the Bommas draft, because the contention is the Bommas draft, because I participated in the constitutional review. I think my brother Cherargei was still in school at that time, so he did not participate in the clamor for the constitutional reforms. The Bommas draft is very clear, and the Bommas draft was unfortunately cannibalized by Parliament. Parliament went and decided to tamper with the Bommas draft. The Bommas draft was very clear. The Prime Minister would be the head of government and would be the leader of the majority party in Parliament or leader of the coalition of parties in Parliament. And it was already it defined the number of executive cabinet secretaries who must be members of Parliament. It has also clearly outlined how the process of appointing cabinet secretaries would be done, and approval will even go up to the Senate. The Senate was supposed to approve cabinet secretaries. It was very clear. It was very tiny form of executive structure, and where we sit from the ODM side, we believe that the Bommas draft is the best proposition for Kenya, which we would like to plead with Kenyans to go back to. It does not mean that, because my friend has said that some people want to be appointed into positions. The Bommas draft does not have a room for anybody to be appointed. If you're going to be the Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya, you will have to go through the electoral process through your political party that must bring as many members of Parliament into Parliament to be able to elect you as the Prime Minister.
And do I understand you correctly in that whoever is elected, or rather is put forward as the Prime Minister, would be playing the role of majority leader in Parliament?
Not really, because majority right now Parliament is not doing the executive functions. We will be moving the executive functions to Parliament, because we are going to have cabinet secretaries sitting in Parliament. They will be members of Parliament. Yes. Okay.
So we take a short break, but when we come back, we get the Senator's response to that argument. Well, in studio with me is the Alego Usonga Member of Parliament, Sam Atandai, together with Charles Kipkulei, who is a political analyst, and the good senator from Nandi, and that is Samson Cherargei. What we were discussing is the referendum debate, and I'd like to get your thoughts as well. The hashtag is NTV Today, the handle is NTV Kenya, or you can also tweet me directly at Burrows. Gentlemen, we're discussing the Bommas draft, or rather that is what you brought up. You brought up, Sam, and you're explaining how the Bommas draft envisioned a parliamentary system of government, which you say was watered down by the very same people who sat where you now sit. So when it comes to appointing a prime minister and appointing a president, what did the Bommas draft propose?
The Bommas draft proposed that the prime minister would be the leader of the majority party in Parliament, or leader of the coalition of parties. It means that if we end up in a situation where we don't have a majority party in parliament, then there will be a coalition of parties in parliament to appoint the leader of that coalition of parties will be the prime minister. That prime minister would then appoint cabinet secretaries who will be between 15 and 20 in number. And the approval process for the cabinet secretaries goes to the Senate. The Senate is the one that has the final authority on the appointment of cabinet secretaries. That was very clear. And of course, we still have the President of the Republic of Kenya will be elected by Kenyans. The President remains the head of state, Commander-in-Chief of the armed forces. So the President, in my view, still is going to wield some substantial powers in as far as positioning the country, engaging with matters that are more external than internal.
Okay.
So I wanted to respond to my friend Senator Cherargei, who has tried to water down this conversation, because he is looking at it in a very narrow perspective. And I think Kenyans must be able to realize that we have a group of leaders who cannot look at things in the way that Kenyans are looking at them. And when we listen to the Kenyans giving their thoughts on whether they need a referendum or not, Kenyans are very articulate. And it's very clear that you hear Kenyans living in far-flung parts of the country, very, very candid, they know what they want. But here we have leaders who are very narrow.
Okay.
They think that
right.
to them referendum,
the senator would disagree with that assessment. And Senator, Alego Usonga says you have you're looking at it in a narrow manner, but I would like to ask you, the reason the ODM has proposed that particular system of governance is for what they say is inclusivity, which is one of the main issues that was brought up in the Building Bridges agreement. There was the question of inclusivity. Do you not see it as necessary? You say it's not the time to be having this conversation about a referendum. But the question of electoral reform, I believe many Kenyans believe, is a timely subject.
Thank you very much. I think, with all due respect, what Sam Atandai, my good friend, is so wrong. In fact, the immediate concern of Kenyans is the cost of living, and that is the conversation we should be having.
But there are those who say siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya.
No, it's not even about. We should be discussing on how to look at the cost of living, issues of VAT that is affecting Kenyans, the issues of farmers. The other day we were discussing about the issues of farmers, how to sort out. The constitution in itself will not be the solution.
But substantively,
and then you ask something about
inclusivity. What do you take issue with when it comes to a parliamentary system of government?
I have said, if we have to review this constitution, it will be reviewed in a timely way. And if we have to review, let us at that time, if we have to go for any constitutional review or referendum, we must do it in a very meticulous way, in a very honest way, in a very substantive way, but not with parochial or narrow interest of where some people, because they are outside government, they think Kenyans is not inclusive. If you ask about the issue of inclusivity, some people imagine that they are not in government. But Senator, the government is not inclusive. The President himself acknowledged in his statement that he signed together with Raila Odinga. Is that not the case, Charles? I agree. We have a problem of inclusivity, especially because he said we have not realized what hope to attain with the electoral process. No, let me answer. I have not finished. One, let us demystify this myth that if you are not part of the day-to-day government, it is not inclusive, and that is a wrong notion. Atandai can be in government and Baba cannot be. Number two, on the issue of electoral reforms, because I'm the chair of Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights in the Senate, and we are looking at the report on how to do electoral reforms. We are trying to see if we can reconstitute the IEBC. That one does not need a constitutional referendum. We need only to sit with members of National Assembly and the Senate and discuss as a true bipartisan approach. But even there are some radical proposals that even some people have proposed that in future, let's have commissioners that represent both political parties, because the biggest players are political parties. Okay. Those are things that we don't need to have. I really want you to come in at this point. Are you convinced that electoral reform does not need to go beyond the reconstitution of IEBC?
Well, listening to Waishimiwa speaking, I think that shows us why you cannot leave this process to politicians. If we are to have a conversation about true referendum and constitutional change, then the question we need to ask ourselves first is, whose referendum are we talking about? What is the referendum question, and is it necessary? So as we go forward, first of all, a referendum in actual sense, is a complex and a very lengthy process. Right now, we do not have a fully constituted IBC, I agree. The law in itself in constituting the IBC has not been finalized in Parliament. We do not have a referendum law in place. Again, in the next, I think 1 year, we need to do a national census, which is very costly. We also need to do boundaries delimitation. So as a country, we also need to ask ourselves critical questions. What is the cost of all these activities that we want to do within a very short time? So my view is that, well, there is a genuine concern amongst the citizenry that the cost of running government is expensive, it's very high. But if we address ourselves to the issue of wastage in government, are we going to address it? Is a referendum the only way out of this? And then if we are to go to a referendum, then we must first of all divorce it from the 2022 question. Because if you are to do a referendum with the myopic vision of fixing or increasing anybody's chances of 2022, then in 2023, 2024, we are going to speak about another referendum. So what we need to do right now is, if, in my view, if a referendum is necessary, then let it be a sixth ballot in 2022. Then the referendum question coincides with the election of 2022, so that nobody benefits from this referendum in 2022, because if we do it, the disagreement you see among the political class is what is going to create confusion among the citizenry. It's going to be, it shall cease to be a people's referendum. It shall become a process that is driven by the political elite to suit a very narrow interest, which may not go beyond 2022.
Okay, but you brought up the question of cost,
yes.
And I'd like the MP for Alego, Usonga, to come in at that point. What about the human cost? Because, okay, fine, there are the financial implications of holding a referendum, but if we get to 2022 and a number of these issues are not ironed out to the satisfaction of the majority of Kenyans, are we not going to find ourselves in the same place we have found ourselves time and again?
Thank you, Olive. I think we should not narrow the conversion on referendum to basically the cost of government, cost of running the government, because that's what most people now are focused on. There are many other issues that the referendum should be able to sort out. And to be able to understand this issue, you must first of all look at the reasons why Kenyans went on the streets clamoring for a new constitution. The reasons were very clear. One was that Kenyans wanted national resources to be shared, distributed equally, and that is why we brought devolution. And devolution, as you know, also has some challenges. And one of the conversations we're having as ODM is that the referendum should be able to help us strengthen devolution, so that our people can be able to benefit from devolution, because we are seeing devolution resources not going straight to our people. We are also seeing that resources going to our counties are being eaten by governors and a few people. So we need a referendum to be able to answer those questions. The other issue that is very important is the transfer of power to the people. You know, 70% of our resources are still being run by national government, the presidency. Only 30% goes to our people on the ground. And this is one of the things that we are saying, that we must be, as a country, we must have a new conversation on how we are going to ensure that only a small number of small resources are kept at the headquarters. And this disposal of power from the presidency is something that we must insist on.
Okay.
If it is going to be done through parliamentary system of government, where now our resources can go to our people, more resources can go to the people, that's what we want to achieve. And lastly, even when we talk about corruption, I think there's a reason why we are not honest, why we are not unable to address corruption. You cannot address corruption in a monolithic system where the presidency still wields immense powers. They are actually the reason why we are not fighting corruption is because of the system of government. The presidency is the reason we are not fighting corruption. Okay. Because if we had a situation where we do not have one person wielding so much powers, then I think we'll be able to address corruption. So there are so many issues that really are coming up in
with
this
the question of referendum.
Senator,
I've seen you nodding, and
I agree with you on the
you seem
issues
to have
of
at least agreed on the question of devolution.
Now you are having an honest conversation, although this is not the right time to have referendum. I want to agree on one thing, that most of the functions that were devolved, I think around was it 50 or 35 under the fourth schedule of the Constitution, have not been transferred. For example, the reason in fact it's becoming expensive to run the government and Kenyans are buying into idea of referendum is one of the issues was to restructure provincial administration to be in line with the devolved form of government. When you go on the ground, you're having ACC, Assistant County Commissioner, and you're having Sub-County Administrator. Yet there is a duplication of roles. So I agree with my friend Atandai that the problem is we have not fully transferred all the functions. For example, agriculture. 95% of agricultural should have been devolved. Only 5% should have remained with the national policy. But you find, for example, people who still buy maize, for example, through National Cereals Produce Board, is the Ministry of Agriculture being paid maybe through the Ministry of Devolution. And therefore, that is where the problem is. On the issue of devolution, I agree that if the national government had agreed to transfer all the functions as provided for the Constitution, these issues of cost of living and duplication of roles would have been finished. And that is why when you go to counties, you have three forms of staff. You have staff seconded by the national government, you have staff that was defunct municipalities, and then you have staff that was being hired by the governor. So at the end of the day, you are using so much money through wage bill and many other duplication of roles between the national government and the county government, and that is why the cost of running the government is very.
And you're saying we don't need a referendum to address those duplication of roles?
Now we need to broaden, and that is why I'm saying let us take time so that when we come up with a question of referendum, and that is why I agree with Kipkulei, whose referendum is this? Is this a referendum of few elites that they decide to build bridges because they were crocodiles on the way going to Canaan? Or is the referendum of Kenyans? They were ordinary Wanjiku. So that is the big question we should ask ourselves.
Okay, Charles, but I mean, you said this political sort of bickering is the reason we should not leave this process to the politicians. So who do we leave the process to then? Because they are elected, they do represent the people of Kenya.
Yeah, we cannot divorce the political leaders from this process, but it should not be an entirely apolitical driven process. And when you see the previous attempts at a constitutional review, even the one that was successfully held in 2010 was a precursor to Ufungamano, and it came even to the Bommas. It involved a wider section of Kenyans, and it was driven at a point where issues were conversed from different sections. Civil society was able to give their views, the citizens were able, so it was all encompassing of different interests. But as at now, the unfortunate thing we have right now is that the cost of living may be used as a smokescreen to introduce a referendum question. But when you ask people, why do we need a referendum? They say we want to change we want to go to the question then becomes a parliamentary system. So we have not addressed the link between a parliamentary system and the cost of living. So the issue is that if you are to seriously interrogate our constitution, then some of the things we need to ask ourselves is, we have a lot of independent commissions. The cost of running these commissions is high. Do we need them, all of them, or are some of them even outlived their usefulness? We have different levels
of sort of making
so
Atandai's point.
The point is, what I'm just trying to say is that we should be careful not to use an existing economic situation to introduce a political agenda into this process, which is what I'm saying.
But as I said at the very beginning, and I'd like the MP at least to come in at that point. Let's not gang up on
Only Kenyans are concerned about the state of the economy, the state of the country. And when I began, I said that this is the time for us to audit, to assess whether the constitution is sitting. And most Kenyans are asking themselves, when the cost of living is going up, when taxes are being levied on them, the question they are asking, do we have
responsible?
And do we have the right constitution? And you have had people, when I go to the constitution, people are telling me, I think we don't need some of these elective positions. They're saying we are overrepresented, and some of these people are doing nothing apart from just earning a salary. I'm happy to say that even the Senate actually should be disbanded, because they have abandoned their responsibility of protecting devolution. They are just running all over the place doing politics. My friend here, as you can see, is more focused on what Ruto will get would become than really how to protect devolution as a member of the Senate. So what we are saying is that there will be many conversations, and Kenyans must begin these conversations. We don't want people who are resisting constitutional reforms. People who are in Kanu, like my friend and William Ruto. They were in Kanu that time when we were fighting for reforms.
They
opposed the new constitution. Now they are telling us now that they are very happy because they think they are going to leave the country. We will not accept. Kenyans must be honest about this conversation.
You deal directly with devolution as a senator. Do you agree that we have too many elective offices, especially where the devolved units are concerned?
No, Olive, I think in all honesty and fairness, I had agreed with him when he was still objective until he derailed along the way, that devolution needs to be strengthened. If you remove Senate, you remove the heartbeat or the heart of devolution. And I want to say this without fear of contradiction, that members of parliament, members of National Assembly, when they are failed, they always want to divert the attention of Kenyans. When members of National Assembly receive 10,000 shillings in toilets to water down the issue of sugar, they started that debate of removing the Senate. When they have failed to protect Kenyans through VAT, by running away and ganging up against Kenyans, introducing 8% on paraffin and diesel, which farmers use and ordinary women in the village use, they have always brought a third line of why the reason we should disband Senate. In fact, Senator Amuafia, they are 47 as opposed to 349. In fact, we should be reducing the number of members of National Assembly or constituencies, because at least counties we can use them and then strengthen Senate. And therefore that is when now they lose, because if we have to do a referendum, let us become objective. Let us not, because even personally, I might not become a senator forever for Nandi. It might happen. We are not protecting these offices for us. We are protecting for the posterity of the country. And I want to tell Kenyans, the cost of democracy is very expensive. If you think it is expensive, try the alternative. And all these issues, when we have this conversation, I wish the members of National Assembly could become objective for the time being. I know they are fighting allegations of receiving 10,000 shillings, and even if we go for parliamentary system, they will be bought even by 5,000 shillings. And therefore, members of parliament, members of National Assembly should remain focused on what they have to do, especially on the issue of VAT. They left Kenyans on their own. If they were genuinely representing the interest of Kenyans, what we should be looking, the constitution that was drafted. And we said, when some of us got against this constitution, we said we didn't need affirmative action, and that is why we have now nominated women rep. We created a position of women representative. We created position of nominated MCAs and nominated members of parliament, and all these issues was through an affirmative. And I think Kipkulei, I might not agree with him to that extent, because this constitution was drafted by activists, and that is why now we are saying we don't need nominated members of parliament. We don't need created or women rep, because these are affirmative measures that were introduced by the new constitution. But I want to thank God, because this constitution, you cannot even amend even a full stop, because when you look under Article 255 of the Constitution, to amend this Constitution, you will need a lot of time. It is a lot of technical, and I think we should thank the people who drafted. I want to thank the drafters, because if the drafters had not made sure that we have a watertight process of reviewing the constitution, I can tell you the people like my good friend Atandai would have decided to build bridges and ensure that they have removed the office of deputy president, and create office of prime minister and what have you, for their own interest or selfish interest that they want to
now I want to give the Alego Usonga member of parliament the right of reply before I have Charles come in. Is what he's saying fair? Have you let Kenyans down on the question of taxes as members of National Assembly, and on the question of the 2/3 gender rule? Because one of the reasons we have all these nominated members of parliament is because there's no clear legislation as to how that process should be undertaken in the National Assembly and in the Senate. And by the way, how did you vote on the question of taxes?
Let me start by the gender rule. I think this is some of the things that we need to converse, and I'm happy that our women members of parliament have already begun the process of lobbying us to support it, and I believe that it's something that we need to support. We need to have gender balance within the National Assembly, in the houses. On the question of VAT, I'm at pain to answer that question, because legislation, finance bill is a product of the executive, where he belongs. He's a member of the Jubilee Party. If the government that he supports, where his friend is the deputy president, is the one that brought this legislation, the president who reintroduced this legislation back to the house through a memorandum, is his president, the one he voted for, and the one he supports. The one his boss is even saying that some outsiders want to remove him from that position. So then you want to do it as your government, and then you want to blame members of parliament for not supporting.
I take it you are an A.
I supported the present memorandum. That one I'm not lying about it. I supported the memorandum. I sit in the finance committee. We went to parliament and members of parliament passed the supplementary budget in the morning. In the supplementary budget included allocations for various functions, even some that were going to be implemented by members of parliament. Whereas the revenue side had to be addressed also, because we had to meet the balance. The budget must balance, and from where I sit, the balance budget was going to balance if we were going to tax Kenyans at VAT. Okay. And taxing Kenyans, VAT tax had fundamental arguments. One, it was not just a tax to raise money, it was something that was also important for our own credibility as a country. Because our partners,
it's not fair of you then to accuse him and tell him it's his president and it's his deputy president.
The executive introduces their proposals to us.
No, but you're in parliament to watch out for the Kenyans.
No, that's not my work. My work is why did you? You know, these people are dishonest. They campaign for their president. When we went for elections, we had our own president. We wanted Raila to become the president, and we campaigned for him. And if had Raila been the president, then I would take responsibility for introduce such punitive taxation laws into parliament. Taxation. That is your business. You should
but you're saying they're punitive, but you voted yes.
Because you are president. Remember, they are the majority. You cannot sit somewhere and bring legislation and expect minority to be the one to oppose it. Where is
but that is the role of an opposition.
No, we are not opposition because we did not. I did not campaign to be opposition. When we were campaigning for elections, we were campaigning to go and lead government. So when these people are the majority in parliament, their president brings a recommendation in parliament to be passed. Why can't you use the majority to educate your president not to bring punitive laws?
Okay, but let's say when you go back to Alego, Usonga, and you tell people that you voted for for the memorandum, what is the reception you get?
But that's in order. Because it's a position that we took as a party, and there's a difference between populism and leadership. Now we are now
which is what the president accused the members of the National Assembly of forgetting.
The members of parliament aligned to URP, the deputy URP wing of Jubilee government.
Okay,
led by William
let me bring in Charles. Charles, please come into the conversation. And the reason I want you to come into this. Okay, thank you, Senator. Let's hear from Charles. Charles, one of the things that keeps coming up here is the handshake. Yeah, so clearly, like there's a story that ran about the deputy president saying that he's suspicious of the ODM party leader Raila Odinga, saying he has a history of betraying people, and the senator spoke about KANU. You know, he mentioned KANU. And Ruto yesterday mentioned CORD, and more recently what happened with NASA. So, how much of this referendum debate is the 2022 politics playing out?
All of it. I think when you see the referendum debate as is currently being discussed, I listened to the ODM Secretary General speaking, and he said that our position on the referendum shall come from the Building Bridges initiative, where our party leader has already pronounced himself on the same issue. So listening to Mheshimiwa Chandi, and maybe just to give some strategic advice to my friend Senator Cherargei, when you hear Mheshimiwa saying that they don't take responsibility for the VAT, what essentially they're trying to tell you is that politics is competition, and when you are in trouble, and this is a side that is competing with you, they will not help you to fix your issue. They may cheer you on to get into more trouble so that they have a more convincing narrative.
And that is where the handshake comes
So you need to be very careful about the genuinity of the handshake. So what I'm trying to say is that from a politically analytic point of view, the handshake and the Building Bridges initiative serves different purposes to the two persons who partook into it. It remains largely amorphous to many Kenyans. Maybe President Uhuru Kenyatta needed it so that the tensions calm in the country. He has an opportunity to basically roll out his agenda 4 and his legacy. Just have a good environment. And for Raila Odinga, is a politician, is in the business of politics. You have to be pragmatic. You have to lay your strategy, and if the handshake gives you an opportunity to reposition yourself and to reinvent yourself, then that is what anybody else will take it. So I think from where I sit myself, I see the Building Bridges initiative as being purely the driver of the referendum process. Already, the idea was that Kenyans are allowed to give their views, but the party leader, one of the, the Building Bridges initiative has 2 principles.
Yes, that's
so
it has been it's a vehicle to drive the referendum agenda. You are implicitly saying that even President Uhuru Kenyatta supports such a position.
It's what I said, that the 2 people shook hands for different reasons.
Correct.
When you come and shake hands, I want stability,
we'll come back
and you want to reinvent yourself. So let me just finish. Let me land. Yeah. So the idea is
I wanted to give us a few minutes just to cool off, but I'll come right back to you to finish that thought, and then we'll get the MP to weigh in on whether or not Raila Odinga should be trusted to live out his end of the bargain with regard to the Building Bridges initiative. Asking the question of a referendum, please share your thoughts. The hashtag is NTV Today. The handle is NTV Kenya. You can also tweet me directly on @O_Burrows. Gentlemen, what are your Twitter handles?
At Samuel Atandai.
At Samuel Atandai. Charles?
Charles Kipkulei.
At Charles Kipkulei. And
at Cherargei Teso.
At Cherargei?
Teso.
Teso.
T-E-S-O.
T-E-S-O.
Yes.
Okay, I hope you're active on Twitter so you can respond to some of the questions perhaps that may arise from our discussion. Charles, I interrupted you when we went to Kiambu.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Olive. What I wanted to say was that with regards to the referendum question and the Building Bridges initiative, when the statement was read on at Arambe House by President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, there was no mention directly of a referendum. It was that we are going to go to Kenyans, seek their views, and then from there we're going to pursue a way forward. But in the statement, there was an explicit statement that said that for a very long time we've been pursuing reforms, but we've never achieved what we wanted to do.
And I thought that would be implied.
It implied that a referendum and changing laws all the time is not the solution. The idea was that we need to relook the values.
That was your reading of it?
From so it will not be fair to use the platform of the Building Bridges initiative to put the horse before the cart and say, I want a referendum, yet Kenyans have not been given an opportunity to present their views, yet the committee has not been given an opportunity to do a report. Then that defeats the purpose of having a committee which is spending money going around the country and collecting views. If the referendum was the question, why not just tell those guys, this is what we want, and then we stop.
And then
I want Sam to respond to what Charles has. Yeah, I'll come straight to you. I'll come straight to you after.
Yes.
But he's raised an important point that because the whole reason we have the current constitution is because of what happened in 2007, 2008. So we had all these dreams and hopes that we attached to the current constitution, but it hasn't fixed the problem, which is what Charles is saying. So it's perhaps it's not new law which will fix the situation we find ourselves time and again during elections.
Let me correct you and say that it is not 2007, 2008 that resulted into a new constitution. There had been campaign for a new constitution since the era of multipartyism, since 1990s.
But what happened in 2007, 2008
what happened is
pushed us in that direction.
Actually, yes, but it facilitated because we took that convention more seriously. But what I wanted to say is that from where we sit and from looking at when the new constitution was promulgated and the recommendations that were put in place, whether there is Building Bridges initiative or not, this is the right time for Kenya to engage in constitutional reform, because what we are doing is that we have realized that the constitution is not sitting pretty with us in certain areas, and this really would have happened even if there was Building Bridges or not. So I think that we need to delink the two. And the other issue is that nobody should stop us from giving our views simply because there exists a Building Bridges team. Raila Odinga is free to give his views, and his views will be treated just like my view or like any other person's view as far as this team is concerned. His view, he does not hold superior or superior votes because of his position. And so we want to continue to plead with everybody that let us not narrow our thoughts on these conversations. They are clearly, from my friends, my panelists, my colleagues here, they have clearly agreed that there are issues that need to be sorted out through the amendment of to the constitution through referendum. So let's take to those issues. Okay. One of them is the need for Kenyans to be inclusive. Inclusivity does not mean we are appointing somebody into position. And I disagree with my senator that we want to change the constitution so that we can create positions for somebody. How do you know that you'll be alive tomorrow if this constitution is going to be done for you?
Yes, he's viewed you. Yes. Coming at that.
How do you know that tomorrow I'll be alive? We are doing a constitution which will serve Kenyans the way it has served Kenyans for the last 7 years. We want this constitution to be watertight so that Kenyans can be able to.
So do you think an evaluation is what?
You know, Olive, running a government is a very serious business, and you know, if you have stayed in opposition for long, it comes with a lot of confusion. But what I want to say, if you look at the building bridges document, it is very clear one of the issues is inclusivity. We don't need a constitutional referendum for every sec. Secondly, I just want to pick two issues there. Issue of corruption. As much as we are fighting corruption at the moment, you look at DPP Nordin Haji and DCI Kinoti. They are doing very well. In fact, I want to thank the president because he has increased funding to anti-corruption agencies that fight corruption in this country. And therefore, if you are lying to Kenyans that we need to go for a referendum so that we can fight corruption, it is flying on their faces. And therefore, I want to challenge our colleagues, even the Building Bridges Initiative document. Those issues that were raised in that document can be handled without a constitutional referendum. We just need to sit down and engage. And I've seen where in fact the appointments that were done the other day by the president, we included a lot of people like Norman Magaya, the CEO of NASA, is now appointed to some members, and that is what we are saying. If the ODM, because NASA died long time ago, if they want to be in government, they should just be honest. We want an Sumkate government. We will organize that there are some kitimoto somewhere where they can sit if that is what they want in government. But as much as Kenyans, the honest Olive, let us not divert the attention of Kenyans. Kenyans are now worried about VAT. Kenyans are now worried about the cost of living. If now we should be telling Kenyans how even the public debt,
but then isn't it the government that put us in the situation we're in now?
The public debt is now running to 5 trillion.
Yes, but who is responsible for that debt?
We are telling the president, can you reconstitute the Ministry of Treasury? Because Treasury as it is now, they no longer have any creative strategies on how to handle the economy of this country. That one you don't need a constitutional referendum. Okay. You need only to reconstitute and ensure on the issue of electoral reforms. As a Committee of Justice, Legal Affairs, and even in the National Assembly, we need to have now that the handshake is there, it comes with a silver lining at some point. Of course, we oppose the intrigues that come with it, is that we can agree through bipartisan approach to conclude the issue of electoral reforms. If we have to reconstitute the IBC, so be it, for the betterment of all of us. Therefore, I agree at some point there are some things that we can do as parliamentarians, not necessarily going through the constitutional referendum.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we have to conclude that conversation there. So just very brief remarks.
We can make a final remarks. I can see Dan Mwangi is here.
Okay, but, very brief, like 30 seconds.
Olive, there are many issues that Kenyans need to address. One of the issues that, from where I sit, that is very urgent is the question of ethnic antagonism, ethnicization of government. He knows very well that the cabinet is, the way the cabinet is constituted, his tribesmates are full in that cabinet, courtesy of his party leader, William Ruto. We want to cure some of these issues, and these issues cannot be cured the way they want us to do it. And this actually, what we are seeing is Kanu. We want to do away with Kanu.
Okay, Charles, let me have your, unfortunately we have to wind this up. Charles, very briefly.
I think Kenya has a progressive but not a perfect constitution. We have a moment to have discussions on whether really our problems are occurring because of the constitution or are as a result of other issues, because I think the spike in public spending has come mainly because of the increased funding in development, these infrastructure projects. So what you need to do is that, my final take is that let's have a sober discussion. It should not be a politically driven process. If it addresses the need of the citizen in terms of reducing the cost of living and also making their life better, I support it, but let it come as the 6th ballot in 2022 so that nobody takes it and uses it to hijack the process so that they can benefit from it in 2022.
Okay, very briefly.
Finally, what I want to say is that let us not have this constitutional debate based on 2022 succession politics or to prevent anybody. Number 2, let us have an honest conversation on the cost of living, on the issue of taxation, or the issue of raising revenue, and also capping the public debt or heavy borrowing that we are doing so that Kenyans can not feel the weight of the economy coming on down on them. And therefore 2022 is a matter of Kenyans will decide. Let us not bring politics into the running of issues that are more important to this country.
I appreciate your views, gentlemen, and thank you very much for making the time to join us. I want to take that conversation online. There are a number of issues that we didn't manage to discuss. One of them is, do you trust Raila Odinga? Will this agreement end up the same way as the Deputy President William Ruto said when he was in Kanu, when he was in court and NASA? And please, let's just take it online. And then of course there's the question of which we'll take online.
That's my part leader. It's not fair that I'm here and that conversation goes back.
Online. We will engage online. You gave your Twitter handles, and also on your part, Senator. Was there good faith to begin with from the Deputy President's side where this handshake was concerned, or have you always been looking for the opportunity to sabotage it? Yes, take that conversation online. The hashtag is NTV Today, at NTV Kenya on Twitter and Facebook. Now to